Hey everybody, Elida Zweidler-McKay here from Engaging Leadership. I want to talk to you today about knowing what you want. And the real question, are you looking for an opinion or are you looking for approval? So I talked to a client recently who was in this situation that came up where she was working with a colleague on a project and they had met. She got some suggestions from her colleague. She took them back and incorporated them into the next version, sent it off to her colleague, and she was so excited because she felt like they had come up with something really great and she loved how it worked. And she was like really proud of this product that she sent back to her colleague. But what she got back was not at all what she had expected. Instead of praise for the changes and the great final product, the response she got instead was a strong opinion about what her colleagues still didn't like. She didn't seem to notice the improvements, and she didn't have the same glowing opinion of it that my client did. That shiny final product that my client created, in the face of that feedback and those opinions, suddenly seemed like kind of a piece of junk, and she really wasn't sure what to do next. I will tell you, this is one of the very hardest things about collaborating with other people. Sometimes their opinions can be so different from our own, and it can really shake us. You know, what looks great to us may not fit what they had in mind, or, you know, we have different outcomes in mind, or we have different expectations. And when that happens, it can be really frustrating. You know, there you are going along, doing what you think is the best thing to do and feeling pretty good about where you've gotten to. And then you get some pushback or some opinion or some feedback that causes you to doubt your progress, to question what you've been doing, to see it through a more unflattering light. And that can really shake you. And, you know, especially if you have any form of imposter syndrome going on, it can be really easy to go down the spiral of taking that feedback personally, to make it mean something about yourself, that you're not good at what you do, or you're not good at this kind of thing, or you'll never figure it out, or you don't really know what you're doing. Before you know it, that idea that you had of seeking input and getting somebody bought in and getting their collaboration turns into this horrible experience where you're doubting the work and you're doubting yourself, and it's like this downward spiral. And the thing is, if you really want to be an engaging leader, my guess is that you want to be someone who's open to input and open to other people's perspectives. So when you get that input and those ideas cause you to shut down, it can be even more dispiriting. Like, here I am, someone who's supposed to want feedback, and look at what I do when I get it. I just shut down. Well, this is the kind of thing I help my clients with all the time. And when we work on this, there are three key pieces that we focus in on. One of them is the role. So getting really clear when you're asking for input from somebody about the role that you're in as you're doing the asking, and also the role that they're in as you're asking them. So are you reaching out to a colleague and asking them to give you their advice as a friend, or are you reaching out to them and asking them to give you their advice as the head of marketing, for example? Now, this idea of paying attention to what role you're in can be so useful in all kinds of contexts when you're working in an organization. One time I remember I was working with a group, I was facilitating like a senior leadership team of an organization, and we had done a bunch of work on what role are you in, what hat are you wearing, and they were considering a proposal. And because we had done that work, in responding to the proposal, the head of IT could say, look, as a member of the leadership team, I think this proposal is really great. I think it's going to take the organization exactly in the direction we need to go, and I support it. But if I put on my hat as the head of IT, I can also see the extra work and the challenge that it's going to present to my organization. We're already swamped by our current commitments, so I have some real hesitations that we're going to have the resources to carry this out the way it needs to be done. So in making this decision as a leadership team, he said, I'd like us to consider that we're also going to need some additional IT resources to make it happen. Do you see how clearly he could put his position out by really paying attention to what role he was in? So instead of saying, I think this is a bad idea, we shouldn't do it, which would be like a blending of the role or only coming from his head of IT role, by articulating, you know, from this perspective, here's what I see, but from this perspective, here's what I see, he was able to give his colleagues more information about the feedback that he was providing to that particular proposal. So that's an example of how you can use a clarity about your role to frame the perspective that you're giving to somebody else when you're giving input. But you can also really use that idea of role when you're the one asking for the feedback. When you're the one looking for it, you can say, I'm just asking as your friend on this one, or, I really need your opinion as the director of finances. How's this going to come across? So you can really articulate to somebody what it is that you're looking for from them and why you're asking them, and that can really set you both up for success in that conversation, because your expectations about what to bring to the table in the conversation are more clear. Now, the other expectation to really pay attention to is, what's the goal of the feedback? Is the goal to get somebody's opinion or to get their approval? And one of the most interesting things about this client situation I described at the beginning is that the final decision about that project that she was working on, those decisions were all hers. The colleague that she was asking for feedback and opinions from wasn't in any kind of role where she needed to approve that final product. It was entirely up to my client to do it any way she wanted. So the colleague was giving her honest opinions, but if you think about how upsetting it was for my client, she was sort of acting as though she had to follow that advice. She felt stuck when she got more feedback. She didn't know what to do with it. She had already liked what she'd come up with, but she had sent it back out kind of looking for some approval. I see my clients give away power like this over and over and over again, where we're looking for approval or looking for acceptance rather than just taking in somebody's input. Soliciting somebody's input or suggestions is not the same as needing their approval. And the more that you tangle those things up, the less likely you'll be willing to kind of ask for input, right? Because if you feel like you have to go with every suggestion people make, or that every time you ask for input, you're really trying to get everybody to approve what you're doing, of course you're going to want to limit the input that you get. So that's another really important piece, is to be clear about when you're asking for somebody's opinion that you may or may not go with, and when are you really asking them, or when is it part of their role to approve what you've come up with. Now, the underlying piece that sort of plays into all of this that I work on with my clients the most is really developing what I call their internal executive presence. That's their sense of self, that real ability to own their own authority and step into their roles with confidence. That's the foundation that's absolutely necessary to being any kind of engaging leader. You have to be really solid in yourself. You have to know what you stand for, what your boundaries are, and what your authority is, so you're not blown around by everyone else's opinions or shutting them out so that you avoid being blown around. This is one of the key ingredients to being an effective leader who really engages and inspires people to do great work. And the thing is, it doesn't come naturally for most people. It's not something you're necessarily taught in school, but it is absolutely something you can learn and something you can develop. And when you do, you become more persuasive, you become more convincing, and you can open up at the same time to really taking in a lot of input, getting a lot of buy-in to what you're doing, because you can make that balance of looking for people's input without necessarily feeling like you have to go with what they've told you. Now, if this kind of situation is one that trips you up or gets in the way of you being the kind of leader that you know you can be, let's talk about it. We'll get on the phone for about 45 minutes. We'll dig into your situation. We'll talk about some next steps that you can take in your career to take your leadership to that next level. If I can help you make those steps in an effective way, we'll talk about what that could look like. And if not, I'll point you to other resources. But either way, I promise it's going to be one of the best conversations that you've had in your career. You can set up that call at zmcoach.net/call. I look forward to talking to you. Take care.